Hey folks, welcome back to the Western Southern YouTube channel. This is going to be a fly fishing 101 video. This is going to be for people that are interested in getting into fly fishing, or maybe they're beginners and they're just kind of, have some questions about things they're doing and ways to be successful. Okay, folks, jumping right in. A 5-weight rod is a great beginner size rod. This is an Orvis rod. You don't have to have a nice rod to get started. Temple Fort Outfitter makes some good beginner rods. I used like junky scientific angler rods and Cortland rods like when I was in college. Fished on the Tuckasegee River in western North Carolina and caught a lot of fish on those rods. So a $50, $100 beginner rod will do you fine. If you want to get something a little bit nicer, it does make a little difference, but don't feel like you need to have a premium rod to get started. Just get a rod and get out there. A 5-weight's going to be fine for anything on the East Coast. In the Rocky Mountains, it'll be fine for 90% of the fishing you do. A 6-weight is a heavier rod than a 5-weight. A 4-weight is a lighter rod. So for example, this is a 7-weight. This is a pretty stout rod. This is a 5-weight. You can catch a big fish on this rod. I actually hooked a tarpon on it one time, but it jumped and got off, obviously. As far as the fly line goes, you just want to get what's called a double taper line. It's thicker in the middle, and then the two ends, the line gets thinner. I like fly lines that are kind of dull or earth tone colors. I don't like the neon colored line. I feel like it spooks the fish. I don't know if it really does, but I like the greens and the blues and the grays. Underneath the fly line, there's what's called the backing. That's like nylon string. If you're buying a value rod, it probably comes all spooled up, but just know that that backing is under there, and it's just there to kind of take up space because your fly line won't take up the whole spool. So the end of your fly line will have a loop, and you attach this thing called the leader to the loop. I actually clip mine off and use what's called a nail knot. I like that better. You can get a little tool that helps you tie it. But a leader is just a tapered piece of monofilament line, usually about 7 to 9 feet long. And that's what you tie your fly to. Now you can also get what's called tippet. And tippet is like really thin monofilament line that you tie on the end of your leader. So maybe if you want your whole tippet leader section to be 12 feet long, you tie 3 feet on the end of a 9-foot leader. And then also as you're kind of like losing flies and taking up little bits of your leader, you can tie longer and longer sections of tippet on without having to tie a whole new leader onto the fly line. A 5X leader and 5X tippet on a 5-weight rod, you can do almost anything with that. As you learn more about fly fishing, you can learn the difference between fishing 7X tippet and 5X tippet, things along those lines. This is a 3-pack of, I thought it was 5X, but it says it's 3X. 7.5 foot long Cortland tapered leaders. I got these at Walmart. I buy almost all my leaders at Walmart. I'll get them in a 3-pack. It's monofilament fishing line. It's not rocket science. This is all my leader material. I got a bunch of this stuff, and so I have 4X, 5X, 6X, cider, 2X, 3X. I think I have everything from like 1X down to 7X, but I also think I have 4 or 5 5X leaders in here. So that just tells you 5X is pretty bread and butter. Okay, next piece. You got your 5-weight rod. You got a bunch of 5X leader on it. When you get out in the water and fish, almost always you want to fish upstream, okay? The fish face upstream, so when you're fishing upstream to them, the water's coming down to you, you're able to sneak up behind the fish and not disturb them when you're walking around and kicking a bunch of stuff up and having that float down on top of them, right? Find the stretch of water you want to fish, walk to the downstream end of it, and then work your way up. There's some nuances where you fish downstream with a dry fly on Silver Creek, but that's really particular. And if you just fish upstream from yourself, most of the time you'll have good luck. Obviously, you can fish across, right? You can fish across the water. That's okay, but just be aware that the fish do see you coming. That they see your shadow, they see movement, and they're really, really sensitive And when they see you coming, that does spook them. And you almost always want to fish in deep water. You know, with the water so shallow, you can see the bottom. It's really pretty to walk around in that water and to kind of look at the rocks. But the reality is the fish aren't going to be there because they're too exposed to predators. And even if they were there, they'll see you coming really quickly and they'll get out of dodge. You know, if you can see the fish, in my experience, it's hard to catch the fish because if I can see the fish can see me. I like to fish. I like to try to catch fish I can't see. Every time I see a fish, you know, big whopper, maybe he's even in deep water and I can see him, you know, down here on the South Fork of the Boise or something, I always have to make a couple casts and I almost never catch those fish. The other piece about deep water is it's often colder. And colder water is able to hold more oxygen, so it's just better for the fish to hang out in that water, right? Right, today it's blazing hot, you know, it's like 95 degrees. On a day like this, I would go out and I wouldn't use waders, but the vast majority of time I do use waders when I'm fishing. Um, you can just get around better in the water. You can focus on what you're doing because a lot of times trout water is pretty cold, right? And it does kind of take a lot out of you if you're in it all day long. I was fishing on the Madison just a couple weeks ago, and you know I would fish for hours on end, and if I didn't have my waders on, man, I would have had hypothermia, you know, an hour after I got started fishing. Sims waders, they cost an arm and a leg. Um, my first pair, I had them for 13 years or something. They actually just kind of started leaking about a month ago, and I had to buy new ones, which stung, but it's part of it. You don't have to, you know, buy Sims. You can buy cheaper waders. They probably won't last as long. I use these Danner Patagonia wading boots. I really like these. I used Sims boots for quite a while, uh, but but I had an issue with them shrinking. Um, and you know, whenever I got my foot in there and would walk around in the water, they would kind of stretch back out. But I just had troubles with them shrinking, man. It was like really a pain. You know, these obviously shrink a little bit, but these are great. These are great boots. They're heavy duty. I don't think they're going anywhere for a really long time. So. Okay, we'll talk about flies for a little bit. The fish feed under the water 99% of the time. Um, that 1% of the time when they're taking dries on the surface, it's really exciting, it's really fun. And the reality is they rarely do that, but they're almost always feeding under the water on little small bugs that are floating by. Okay, there's dry flies. Dry flies float on the surface and the fish comes up and hits it from the top. And then there's nymphs or wet flies, and you know, have all these other names: streamers, emergers, nymphs, wet flies, soft hackles. All those are underwater, and dry flies are on top. And it's very common practice to fish two flies on the same rig. So maybe tying like a dry fly on, especially this time of year, right? You tie a hopper on, and then you tie like 18 inches, maybe 24 inches of that 5X tippet off the back of the hook, and then you tie like a small fly on the end of that, so that you're fishing the hopper and then you're also fishing underneath the water. The fish feed under the water 99% of the time. Only 1% of the time do they feed on top. That's just the reality. It's really fun when they're taking top water, but they're always eating underneath. And so if you're fishing a dry fly, unless it's like obvious that there's a big hatch happening and the fish are just going crazy, I always fish of what's called a dry dropper, right? Dry fly on top, dropper on the bottom. I almost always fish a dry dropper when I'm doing that. You know, if you're fishing underwater, I often fish two flies. This is called a mob fly. This is like the best fly in the world. Um, that's a Spanish bullet that's left over from Madison River. And a lot of people do what's called, uh, they put what's called an indicator, which is basically a bobber, right? A float, you know, real far up here on your leader. And so, you know, you throw it in a run, you let it drift, and whenever the bobber or the indicator goes underwater, or if it even just stops moving, right, you want to try to set the hook because there might be a fish that has picked the fly up. I don't really indicator fish anymore. I do what's called tight line nymphing or Euro nymphing. I'll try to put a link up if I remember. I made a video about that too. But you probably wouldn't want to start off doing tight line nymphing or Euro nymphing, you probably want to start fishing with an indicator, just so you get the hang of it. You know, if you're going to fish under the water, you want to fish deep, right? Again, that deep water, a deep run, that's where the fish are going to be. They're protected. The water's cold, holds more oxygen. Just in general, deeper water is better to fish. Might have to put some weight. You might have to fish something kind of heavy, right? Because a lot of times trout water's moving fast, right? So keep that in mind. Uh, and you know, if you're getting stuck on the bottom every now and then you're probably fishing where the fish are at. You know, if you're losing your fly every time you cast, that's not going to be helpful. But every now and then, if you get hung up on the bottom, that's a good thing. That tells you your fly's getting down there, you're near the bottom, and the fish are going to be near the bottom, or or at least on a water column, kind of close to the bottom a lot of times. You know, some great flies to start off with. It's called a rubber legs, right? It's just like a bunch of fuzz with like little rubber legs coming off of it. You can get versions of this that are heavy that sink better. Of course, the mob fly I'm a big fan of. I probably caught more fish on a mob fly than everything else combined, maybe. Caught a lot of fish on a mob fly. Foam hopper. I think I tied that one. It's a really big foam hopper. That's probably a little too big, really. Yeah, like this guy. This doesn't have as much foam, but it's a good little hopper right there. It's a good fly. Scarmy worm. You might get judged, but you'll probably catch fish. It's a great fly. This is called a stimulator. It's orange, kind of like a salmon fly. It's just got a lot of fuzz on it. You can kind of pass this as a hopper too, but stimulator's a good fly to fish. This is what I was looking for. This is called a hare's ear nymph. It's one of the best flies out there. It's little, it's green. Just looks like a bug. Doesn't look like anything fancy. Just looks like a bunch of mud around a hook. Great fly. Here's a bunch more hoppers. These are black and orange. A lot of times these black and orange or black and red hoppers end up doing pretty well. Black and purple, especially on the Salmon River up here. And then of course you have all your Perdigon nymphs. And these little things are like, they're just very simple little nymphs that look like that, right? It's just like a bead and some thread wrapped around a hook. Spanish bullet, shopback's a good one too. And these just mimic little bugs hatching and going to the surface to turn into mayflies or something. I don't seem to have one handy, but a woolly booger's a great fly too to fish. Yvon Chouinard, the guy that started Patagonia Gear Company, he helped write a book called Simple Fly Fishing. Great book. He says in that book, if he could only have one, you know, if he could only fish one fly for the rest of his life, it would be a woolly booger. And that's because he can drift it, he can fish it like a nymph. He said, you know, he can fish it like a streamer. And a streamer is basically like a fly that's like big and kind of looks like a fish, right? Might look like this. This is a game changer. This is a great streamer to fish. Literally looks like a fish. I think it's like $9 a piece, though. They're expensive. There's all kinds of other things. This guy. Sparkle minnow is a great streamer to fish. It's easy to fly. It's cheap to buy. I caught a big old bull trout on a sparkle minnow one time in the backcountry, which was cool. So streamer fishing's fun also. All right, folks, the most important thing is to get out there and fish. You don't have to have a super fancy setup. Get out there, slap the water, and have a great time. Hit like and subscribe, everybody, and stay tuned for next week. Take care.